juniors, seniors?
I'm a junior.
Sophomore, juniors.
Sophomore,
Yeah.
junior. Oh, that's great. Yeah. So I think it's excellent to get involved in research, especially as an undergraduate, especially early in your undergraduate career. When I was a freshman and sophomore, the biggest topic of my research probably related to what kinds of parties I wanted to go to and which kinds of classes I could skip most easily without my grades suffering. And then by my junior year, I discovered that research was actually this thing I could do that actually related to my intellectual passions. And so it was a project that I did leading into my senior year, studying the evolution of hip hop music as it relates to the technologies involved in creating music and the sociocultural development of hip hop. I did that as an honors project as a junior summer leading into senior, and I realized, wow, like I can make a whole career out of just learning stuff that I find interesting. And it was that moment where I really embraced my kind of inner nerd and decided to be a student for the rest of my life, which is kind of what a professor is, a research professor. So maybe some of you are interested in that track. You know, nuclear physics might have a different trajectory than my hip hop music study, but who knows? It's generally, you know, it's all about curiosity and inquiry and passion for your subject. And so if you can get excited about learning, especially about creating new knowledge and then sharing what you've learned with the world, like that's great no matter what field you're in. So kudos to you guys for being ahead of the curve, I think. So for me, so my background, the hip hop thing was related to media and technology. That led me into focusing on human computer interaction as an early graduate student, which led me to focusing on media psychology, which is essentially the understanding of how people are influenced by the media that they use and interact with, which then later connected to my interests in video games and virtual reality, which I eventually specialized into avatars. Avatars are kind of the piece of the medium, the interactive mediated experience that I find the most interesting. Hold on, I need to holler at a kid. I might have to do this a couple of times. Oh, never mind, he's in his class. His teacher is always late for this class. Anyway, so that's my general trajectory. Today, I'll talk to you a little bit about a theory that I find most interesting. It's called the Proteus Effect, or it's really a phenomenon, not a theory, and it's named for the Greek god Proteus. I'll take you through here. So let's start though with what an avatar is. You guys probably recognize maybe Avatar: The Last Airbender or the Blue Alien movie, but the term avatar comes from Hinduism. It means a descent of a god into an earthly form. You know, like in the Greek god stories, the gods would sometimes disguise themselves as a human and make babies or go to parties. Well, the origins of that idea perhaps came from Hinduism, and they were called avatars. But it wasn't until recent fiction and video games when it got popularized in our kind of vernacular, modern vernacular. So do you guys play games? Anyone? Yeah, all right, cool. Nerd cred. So even if this research topic is not relevant to your intellectual pursuits, it might be relevant to at least your kind of entertainment pastimes. And in some ways, hopefully, to your future workplaces. And maybe that's a connection I'll make off the top of my head here because it's a grant proposal I'm working on currently. And so we define in communication avatars as mediated representations of human users that facilitate interactions with other stuff like people or the environment, and mediated. So it doesn't have to be digital. Often we think of digital avatars as kind of the norm, right, in a video game or virtual world, but I've written about cars as avatars because they can represent me, they can facilitate interaction, robots, remote control, anything, drones. Even my mouse pointer here is like an avatar, even though it's not anthropomorphic. You can have high or low realism avatars, what really matters is that it's a representation of the self. It's not the self itself. So it's a representation, and you do something with it. It's not just an icon or a picture of me. It's used for interaction. Okay, so there's our definition. I use some literature from the field to back it up. Actually, I'd like to expand the definition a little bit and replace human with intelligent entity, because you could imagine a highly evolved artificial intelligence having an avatar that represents it. But that's not, that's not the supercomputer that's driving the algorithms that facilitate the interaction with it. So in that sense, it doesn't have to be a human, but it's very important that we differentiate between kind of non-playable characters, NPCs, like Siri. Siri's not an avatar because Siri doesn't represent a human. You could say that Siri is the avatar of Apple, in the same way maybe that you could say Sparty is the avatar of MSU. And I've done some research with Sparty avatars. I was working on that paper today. But what I'm really interested in are responses to and through avatars. So first of all, responses to avatars, there's this idea of the media equation, which suggests that people respond naturally to media, like computers, in the same way that we socially respond to other people. So let's do an experiment. This is the paradigm. This is the equation. In the media equation, you have a social rule about how people interact. I tell two people they're on the same team. They go do a task. They say they like each other more than if I say they're on different teams. Now let's replace one of the people with a computer. It's just text on a screen. And I tell you that you're on the same team as this computer interacting through text on a screen. You wear a green band and it's got a green band. You'll say the computer is faster, more accurate, better, equipped, etc., than if I tell you you're on a different team than the computer. Or if the computer's polite to you, it compliments you, all these things, you'll say the computer's information was better, faster, etc. So these social rules about human interaction apply to interactions with computers. And so this of course works for avatars, except for when they're in the uncanny valley. Who's heard of this concept? Anyone? No, yeah, Sam?
Yeah, I've heard about it.
So can you explain the graph here?
Yeah, so trying to get it. So there's this like sort of point where something is so close to being able to replicate something like exactly, but not quite, that we just kind of find it creepy. And so our emotional response is going to go more negative than positive. But generally, as we this thing that we're trying to replicate gets closer to, I guess, the ideal, then it's gonna we're gonna have a more positive response with it.
Yeah, so generally, and the thing we're trying to replicate, at least with avatars, is the human. I haven't heard of this in other contexts, but maybe there is, which is interesting. But yeah, the more human-like the depiction of the human is, the more we like it until we get really close to it. And then it gets creepy looking. That's a robot right there. I don't know how grainy it is on your screens, but then eventually they pass the threshold, they look human, they're Cylons, you can't tell the difference, or they're hosts in, what's that show? Westworld, or there are plenty of science fiction shows that depict very human-like avatars. So that's the uncanny valley that does seem to break this natural social interaction with avatars. Other responses to avatars that are interesting, there's this idea of transformed social interactions. So you can decouple your characteristics as a human from your avatar's characteristics in ways that are influential. So for example, just this Zoom call, I am an avatar, right? Like I'm a mediated representation of myself. What you are looking at, you're looking at digital pixels on a screen, right? You're not looking at me. It's photorealistic in a sense, but it's not completely accurate. And there are things I can do to make myself more or less, accurate. I can throw on these shades. I can make it VR goggles, even creepier. I can give myself some awesome eyebrows and an extra beard. I did shave, so that effect isn't very obvious. some pink lipstick, like super pink lipstick. There we go. How do I look? Am I an avatar? This is under studio effects. If you update your Zoom, you can all play around with this. And so like, obviously these are obvious changes. And so you're probably, you're not influenced by them, but I can do other things. I can put a smile on my face as you tell good jokes. I could do that digitally. I could do that whenever I look at my boss. I could make it so that I'm always looking at the camera, and the software will probably start doing this relatively soon. Even though I'm looking at you on my screen, I can make it look like I'm looking at you on the camera. And when you have eye gaze matching, it increases persuasion, it increases liking. So you're, again, decoupling. I could make it look like if I was standing in a room and you were all out there in the audience, but I was somehow an avatar, maybe through augmented reality, I could make it look like I was mimicking all of your head movements at a 4-second delay. And there are studies suggesting that that increases persuasion and liking. I could also, match gaze with each and every one of you individually, even though, I could be looking out into space. So there are many ways to increase liking, trust, persuasion. Oh, I could morph my face with yours individually. So each of you would see 30% of yourself in me, and most people don't detect it. Like 90-some% of people don't detect this, but increases like how much you're willing to vote for a political candidate or how much you like that person. So there are all these ways in which you can decouple the avatar and the user, and it is pretty interesting. My interest is not as much though in the responses to the avatar as it is to oh yeah, there's some morphing. Trump and Putin's love child right there in the middle. I'm more interested in responses to avatar use. So when you use the avatar, I'm not looking at you responding to me. Now I'm looking at you looking at your own avatar, right? If you put the eyebrows on, that kind of thing. So why is this so powerful? Why is this interesting? If you look at social cognitive theory, which is a major theory in psychology from Albert Bandura, one of the rock stars of psychology and godfathers of kind of communication psychology. The reason that using an avatar is impactful is because doing stuff is impactful. So this theory says, social cognitive theory or social learning theory says we learn from watching other people do things. You see someone throwing a ball and you're a baby, then you mimic it, and eventually you throw the ball too. Watching that other target or model throw the ball helps you learn how to do it. But inactive experience is the most impactful. You have to do the thing yourself in order to really learn it. So vicarious experience alone can help you learn, right? We watch TV, we learn from that. We look on social media. We're constantly learning from things we're not doing. The interesting part, Thilo, what's wrong? You don't know where the songs are. Oh. Look in the drawer, Thilo. I'm so sorry. So avatars facilitate mediated inactive experiences. This means you're not doing it yourself because it's an avatar, but you're not just sitting there watching a character on the screen do it. You're doing it through the avatar, right? So like an obvious example is like if I'm watching someone exercise on TV and I'm not exercising too, like maybe I'm exercising along with them, I'm trying to copy them, but if I have an avatar that's exercising with them and I'm controlling the avatar, I will feel much more connected to them. I'll feel socially present with them. I'll feel that myself is present. So I'm more likely to exercise for a longer amount of time. So that leads us to this idea of the Proteus Effect, named for the Greek god Proteus because he was a malleable god, or maybe he's not a god, he's like a sub-god. But anyway, the idea is that people who use avatars everyone has a malleable self-concept. And when you use an avatar, it affects your self-perception. And you start to act in ways that are consistent with the avatar's identity characteristics. So studies have found that if you use a taller avatar, you'll negotiate more aggressively afterwards. If you use a less attractive avatar, you'll choose less attractive dating partners in a dating simulator. If you see your avatar gain or lose weight, that will affect how much you eat and exercise in the following week, a whole week for the exercise effect. This is my favorite one. If you use an avatar in Second Life that looks like an inventor over there on the left compared to just plain clothes, in a subsequent brainstorming task, you'll actually come up with more creative ideas. And these aren't just one-off studies. I did a meta-analysis that got published last year, no, 2 years ago, which suggests that these effect sizes are relatively small. It's been, relatively large for media studies. It's still a small to medium effect size by kind of rules of thumb. It's not the same thing as like in nuclear physics, if my atom is decaying and I measure the effect of that, like you're probably going to get a big effect size. I don't know, actually, that's just an idea I might mistakenly have about the hard sciences versus social sciences. But in psychology, social sciences, when we get small to medium effect sizes, we still get really excited because it means I can change behaviors. I can change the way that people make decisions about their lives or how they brainstorm or how they kind of feel confident or empowered through these manipulations. So that's the Proteus effect. I'm going to skip this. This is the slide I go over with PhD students who are interested in kind of the evolution of the theories and the studies that support them. This is also a slide for PhD students where we talk about what theories are or really what they're not. So essentially a theory has to be a good explanation of why something happens. And a lot of my work is focused on why the Proteus effect happens. It could be because of self-perception changes. It could be because of priming. It could be more complicated and interplay between the two and somehow relate to self-concept being perceived and influenced through priming. So, but I'm just going to jump into this idea of kind of follow-up idea of application, of avatarification. How many of you have heard of gamification? Okay, Jeremy, what is gamification?
It's making a mundane or a boring task seem fun by posing it as a game.
Absolutely. So avatarification is the correlate to that. Maybe it's a subset of gamification. It's making a mundane task more interesting, more engaging by adding avatar elements, not game elements. And so what do I mean by avatar elements? Well, all of these are gamified apps, but they can also have avatar elements, a profile, a mediated self-representation that facilitates interaction with other stuff. Going back to the definition. So I think gamification and avatarification go hand in hand, but we haven't really studied avatarification very much. But just looking at a few of these studies now, I'll just talk about some empirical findings. You'll see the potential perhaps in certain domains of outcomes. So here, this was my dissertation study a million years ago. I had people customize a male or a female avatar, and then they play Wii Sword Play, and then they did a math task, and I primed them for stereotypes. I said, your scores will be compared across genders based on avatar gender. And I found that if they used a female avatar, they had worse math performance. This is consistent with stereotype threat. If we're in a room full of men and there's one woman, Emily, this might be familiar to you at the moment. And we reminded you of a stereotype that women aren't as good as men at math, which is not true. But if we reminded you of that just by being in this room, women are more likely to perform worse than if they're in an equally gendered room. The interesting thing about this study and other studies like it is the effect of the avatar. It's not your own gender, it's the avatar's gender that influences your math performance here. So this suggests maybe, I mean, of course, it's a bad news story because it's a stereotype and it's harming performance, but it also suggests that we could use avatar traits to improve performance in things like math and science. So thinking about science here, I have a study in which I had people customize the avatar to either represent the self or to represent the game story. It was Destiny. And I looked at not only their performance in the game, but I also looked at their attitudes about STEM fields afterwards. So I basically, Daisy, could someone open the door for this dog, please? Sorry, she's sitting in here whining. Come here, Daisy, come here. Come say hello. So if they customize the avatar to represent the game story, and then I gave them stereotype threat, just a simple stereotype threat message, they essentially were less likely to say that women are worse at STEM fields than men. It's a complicated statement, but the general idea is that the avatar identity, by focusing on the game story instead of the self, the avatar acts as a buffer against the stereotype threat. So instead of just making the claim, you know, like we should all use kind of normal avatars. Ever introduce a male avatar because that makes you good at math? Well, no, that doesn't make sense. People want to use avatars that represent themselves, right? But maybe the solution here is not to make avatars that represent people exactly, or not to encourage people to make them, but to encourage avatars that are unrelated to our identities. So that maybe I normalize in Zoom meetings, we all show up and we are not humans, or you can't really tell my gender, my race, my age, my able-bodiedness in a Zoom meeting, because all of those things do relate to stereotypes. So by creating norms of kind of reducing identity salience in our avatars, maybe we can have more egalitarian outcomes with these technologies. Here's another one. Okay, so with this one, we tried to cut gender from the equation. So we just had science-y or non-science-y avatars in a very simple game interface. And we found that the science-y avatars led to increased STEM learning and self-efficacy and interest for boys. And avatar identification was associated with those things for boys, but feelings of avatar embodiment was associated with self-efficacy for girls. This, I'm not really sure what's going on with this finding, except that we're essentially increasing interest, though not equally across boys and girls. We're increasing interest in STEM or self-efficacy in STEM through science-y avatars, which might be a good thing, right? But we need to find ways to do it with equity, right? So that it's not only a benefit for the people who are otherwise benefiting. And I've got this other line of research which focuses on gaming toxicity and gendered effects of gaming toxicity. I won't go into that today, but it's relevant here too. The general argument, the reason I measure STEM attitudes is because games lead to STEM interests. How many of you, so all of you said you played games, right? Most of you are sciencey. Games probably contributed to that. Games help with spatial rotation skills, which are good for the hard sciences, problem solving, persistence in hard challenges, doing problem sets, that kind of thing. So if gaming toxicity has a disproportionately negative effect on women and girls and people of color and people who aren't hetero, then all of those benefits are being disproportionately kind of apportioned to people who aren't in the minority, right? So it's reinforcing these disparities that we probably already have, or we certainly do, in certain STEM fields, computer science, hard sciences, that kind of thing. So, so thinking about avatars as a possible solution for that. When we're thinking about motivating science, we also have to think about not reinforcing the disparities. This is a theory slide. I'm kind of just going to skip it. But I am going to jump to avatars. So this is the same theory idea. So we can interact with mediated objects as avatars in ways that represent the self. So that's up here. You've got your bumper sticker. You customize your car. You've got social others. So this is Kit from Knight Rider, a talking car that drives itself, or just as a tool that gets you from A to B. That's a goofy icon. But based on this idea that the same entity could shift between these things, right? Like you could drive the car and then it could start driving itself. Or you could talk to Siri, but then maybe Siri represents you as an avatar. Maybe my avatar in this Zoom meeting becomes my virtual butler, that kind of thing. So we've got this other extension of the Proteus effect. I just submitted this paper again last night. It's the idea of agent embodiment. So I think I call them controllable avatars now, but in a nutshell, if you have an agent come and give you, if Siri comes along and says, you know, you should really go eat at McDonald's today. And then Siri says, but before you do anything, let's play a game. And you're like, what? And you're like, yeah, you controlled me in the Siri road race. And so now you see Siri in a little car. Now you control Siri. Siri's a weird one because she's disembodied. But imagine it's an embodied avatar. So you control that in some sort of experience. The theory suggests that because the agent gave me an attitude before, and now I'm controlling it as an avatar, the Proteus effect will happen, and I will actually conform to that attitude more. So that's what we found in this study. In VR, participants came in, and this blue mech said, there was a recent disaster. Disaster relief is really important. I'm a mechanized environmental cleanup helper robot mech. And so you're going to control me, or you're going to control a mech to clean up after this disaster. And so you either got in a blue cockpit or a red cockpit in VR. Do I have images? No, I don't. And then you went through, you moved your arms around. And what we found was when people got in, it's the same exact experience, blue or red, right? But when they thought they were in the mech that had spoken to them previously, afterwards, they said they were willing to pledge more time and money to disaster relief. So the attitude that the avatar gave them, they associated with the avatar that they controlled, if they controlled it, compared to a control group that didn't control it. Oh, that's a confusing use of the word control. But the control of the avatar that had the attitude led to behavioral conformity to the attitude. So this is kind of an extension of the Proteus effect in a new direction. So what are some of the implications? We're increasingly going to have social agents all around us, and they can become avatars. And so this increases the opportunities for avatarification or avatarization or whatever you want to call it. And that means there are more opportunities for influence, right? It could be influence to get kids to do more science work, to work harder on their math problem sets. It could be influence to make you buy that shitty food that you didn't need anyway, or pay for an upgrade in a game that doesn't really make your life better, right? So, so I guess the fundamental conclusion is that this is a double-edged sword, like many technologies, and so I'm really excited about the potential to do good with avatars through the Proteus effect, and there's a lot of research out there which suggests that we will be able to do that, and we can inform technological development in that direction. But we also need to develop media literacy. You guys might have heard that term before, media literacy. So in the traditional context, it's like, is this news fake or not? Is this person trying to persuade me to buy some stuff or not? But in this new context, it's going to be like, is my avatar trying to influence me in ways that I don't perceive, right? That's a totally different type of information processing that, you know, the future media consumers of the world will have to grapple with. And of course, we researchers as well. All right, I'm going to recap. This is what I do for fun. I wrap a summary of the research topic. So here you go. Please excuse this divergence. It might be odious. Yes, I hope you learn, yes, about the Proteus effect as a phenomenon, which I've written many research papers on. And this nerdy song, the Proteus effect, is when your virtual self, yes, your avatar, changes how you think and act, and yes, that's bizarre, but replications we see in a diversity of context, e.g., taller avatars cause more dating, darker skin avatars bias divesting, older avatars more future investing, healthy size avatars exercise proclivity, inventor avatars more creativity, gendered avatars self-stereotyping, antisocial avatars negatively griping. The list goes on. Effect size is relatively strong for a media effect phenomenon. And if you want details and stats, I know that there's a published meta-analysis. I wrote it, but let's discuss ethical implications, avatars for influence or persuasion. I call it avatarification, related to gamification, but potentially more efficacious. The virtual you is a significant cue to affect your self-perception and direct what you do. It's an opportunity that is ripe to abuse, to push you toward crap you likely shouldn't choose. So let's be careful with the virtual self. Researchers, focus on education and health. Don't use the power for personal wealth or in stealth just to compel your clientele. Though I know technology inevitably is a double-edged sword, so we will definitely need to achieve new media literacies, especially as avatars are increasingly ubiquitous. So we might discuss what to trust. Just because it's virtual doesn't make it virtuous. I hope this little rap was not superfluous, and now you know the effect named Proteus. All right, there's my shtick. There's my rapitar. One of many in my repertoire. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. So yeah, do you have any questions?
I have one actually. So you mentioned that height impacts aggressiveness, like the height of the avatar.
Aggressive negotiating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any studies on like picking a female or male avatar and aggressive negotiating?
There might be. Off the top of my head, I can't think of one. But I'll actually search my log for the meta-analysis. I'm pretty sure, I mean, there's certainly research on gender and negotiating and stereotype threat. So if you prime gender before negotiating, women do worse than if you don't prime gender, because of the stereotype, you know, about power and aggression. So if there hasn't been a study on that, there will be. Someone will make that connection and eventually test that. And I'm pretty sure they will find exactly what you would expect. What would you expect, Emily?
If you prime the stereotype that males are more aggressive with negotiating, and then
Through the avatar. So how?
If you play a female avatar, you'd be less aggressive in negotiations. Yep. After hearing that prime.
Yep. Or you don't even need to hear the prime. Even, you know, the stereotype might just be kind of implicit. And so we say like, hey, welcome to our study. You're going to negotiate in this virtual environment with an avatar. And yeah, we just look at female versus male avatar. And for both women and men, we would expect less aggressive negotiating as female avatars. That is one of many great ideas from research questions that I would love to follow up as a real study. I wish I could follow them all up, but let me see here. So I've got negotiating, and I'll keep looking into my my log here. But if anyone else has a question, do you have a follow-up, Emily? No?
Do you teach what courses do you teach at MSU?
Yeah, so I'm actually teaching a course right now called Avatar Psychology for Designers, but it's not only for designers. So anyone who is interested in avatar psychology could take it. And I also teach a class called Understanding Media. It's Media and Information 101. So that's like, you know, basic intro to the history of media studies, the effects, media psychology, that kind of thing. And then I teach a class called Understanding Future Media, Reflections in the Black Mirror, where we watch Black Mirror episodes and we think about how these science fiction depictions of the media relate to our own real world media uses, for better or worse, often for worse because it's Black Mirror, a dystopian show about what is happening now by looking at the future, but also sometimes for better. And I think I found one which relates to, oh, I see. Negotiating is not, okay, this is a multi-study. Yep, nobody's done it. Emily, good idea. Okay, other questions. What else do I teach? I teach some PhD level classes on theory building. Yeah.
Do you have a specific Black Mirror episode that was especially interesting to analyze? Just curious.
Oh. Well, I lead with the entire history of you, and that's one of my favorites, an oldie but goodie. Do you know it? Do you know Black Mirror a little bit, or?
I've seen it, but I'd have to look up the episode to know which one that is by
That's the
name.
one where the like grain is implanted in you and you remember everything because you can like replay everything. So that one's pretty good. I really like Bandersnatch, which is the choose your own adventure, but I think I like it more for entertainment value. There's one called Hated in the Nation, in which the person with the most likes to hashtag death to so-and-so dies. And so it's kind of like crowd murder. That one's provocative. Nosedive. Oh man, Nosedive is the one where social media likes are super important to people, and then this woman kind of spirals out of control. That one makes you think twice about social media. Are any of them very good from an avatar perspective? There's the Archangel. That's one of my favorites as a parent. The mother kind of implants this thing in the daughter to like keep the daughter from seeing traumatic stuff, and then the daughter doesn't learn how to cope with those things. And yeah.
There's a question in the chat.
Oh.
Question is,
Have there been any attempts at advertising using avatars? Yeah, avatars. Certainly. Let's do self-endorsement. You can still see my screen, right? So this is an interesting study. Show me images. Oh, no, that's not the one with images. Maybe this one. Yeah. So pretty much you see yourself with the product. And so does that make you like it more? Maybe, but I think there are more subtle ways to make you like the product. Like maybe instead of having it be you, maybe you customize or maybe you play as Mario or whatever, and then afterwards you see Mario drinking the soda. You're probably more likely to want that soda. Or maybe beforehand you see Mario drinking the soda, and then you play Mario, and then we ask you how much soda you want. That is coming. That is totally coming. It's creepy and weird.
I've got a question. So how do you think the Proteus effect, and in terms of gaming, how do you think if gaming companies keep going down the Proteus route where they keep making avatars for their games more and more interactive with the users, how do you think that will affect the gaming industry overall and maybe even society?
Yeah. Have you seen Ready Player One?
I was gonna I was gonna kind of relate it to that, to be honest, but yeah, I have.
Yeah. I mean, so if you can imagine a future where the lines between the game worlds we live in or spend our time in and the real world blur, especially as augmented reality technologies become ubiquitous, then I could imagine a world in which we see, unless you take off your goggles, which will be unpleasant for most people because they'll just be used to seeing an enhanced environment, you'll see people as enhanced avatars, right? As they'll have, everyone will potentially be able to choose how they are seen digitally to others, assuming we all use one platform. Maybe it's Zoom. Maybe Zoom is the lens through which we see everyone as we're walking around the streets of the city or wherever. And so then, yeah, all that gaming technology kind of gets used for everyday purposes. But in the entertainment context, these gaming companies are making the avatars increasingly interactive, and the AI driving them is only going to get better. And so I guess the question becomes, is this a good thing or a bad thing, right? The worst thing about games is overuse. Aggression effects, research suggests, are quite minimal and limited in time, but overuse, right? Like if you don't really care to have relationships with other real humans because you're satisfied by your relationships with the AI's avatars, and you not only play with them, but you date them or otherwise, have relationships that are important and intimate, then that's a problem for society for sure, right? We see this a bit in Japan. Just culturally, they're maybe more, they're ahead of our curve in terms of having relationships with non-human things, and reproduction rates are plummeting. Like their society is not sustainable at the current rates. So we need to make babies. That's important for humans. I mean, like overpopulation is an issue too. So it's kind of weird to worry about that at the same time as having 7 billion people on the planet. But yeah, maybe the non-gamers will inherit the earth because they'll be the ones actually making babies.
I have a question in regards to like the uncanny valley with like how like when do people dislike how realistic something is? Has that changed over the years as like the technology has become more realistic? Like at first was it like, oh, that looks so similar to me, even when it like by now standards it would be like, oh, that looks so much like a fake avatar. Like has that changed as things have been able to look more realistic?
So there are two pieces. Why am I doing this manually? There are two pieces to the uncanny valley. I think one side is the base psychological response. So we've got kind of an inherent biologically wired adverse response to things that are disgusting to us, right? Like diseased people, zombies, decaying bodies. Those things are probably the reason we have the uncanny valley. It's kind of it's intrinsic, it's intuitive, it's innate. On the other hand, there are cultural differences in how people experience disgust, right? Certain cultures might feel more comfortable with certain foods that other cultures find disgusting. So there's an example of that disgust response being learned. So I think you're talking about the latter side. Like as we spend more time with avatars, as we develop them, they're certainly getting more realistic. So that in that sense, they might be passing the uncanny valley. But also we might be more comfortable with weird looking avatars as time passes, just because we see them more often now, right? They're less, we realize like, oh, that weird looking avatar is not a decaying human body that could cause me disease and death. I mean, obviously, like we don't think that consciously, but subconsciously that might have been going on before, but now it's going on to a lesser extent because we're used to it. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah.
I was curious if like this Proteus effect is influenced by the like medium that we interact with, like the avatars. Because
That's an
we've got, like,
awesome question,
yeah,
Sam.
we've got like VR on one side, and like we have like this conventional computer screen.
So a few months after I published that meta-analysis, I realized, oh shit, we could have tested this very question, because half of the 50 studies we looked at used VR and half used flat screen desktops. And so we went back and did it, and we're planning to publish a follow-up with some other research questions. And we found no difference.
Oh, really?
No
I would have
difference.
expected VR to
Yeah,
have a stronger
yeah.
effect.
So the question is why? Is it because VR is actually kind of nauseating? You know what I mean? Like and also in VR, you focus more on the embodied experience. So you're not seeing the avatar the whole time. So the avatar might actually be more influential in non-VR because it's a weaker embodiment experience. Whereas when you're embodying it, especially if it's in the first person, you tend to feel like it's just me. So but if they're equal, so maybe VR would be more influential because it's more immersive, but then it's counteracting its own strength by not reinforcing the avatar's identity.
Gotcha.
And how do we tease that out, right? Like that's a tough research question to design an experiment to test. So I think we just need to wait. We need to wait kind of as culture changes, as the VR technologies get better. We're also coding all of the avatars in the meta-analysis. So in other people's published studies, we have pictures of all of them. And then we're doing a study where we have people rate how uncanny they are and how realistic they look. And one idea might be what matters more is whether or not the avatar is uncanny. If it's uncanny, then it's not going to have a strong effect because I'm not going to feel as connected to it. So it's less likely to affect my self-perception. So that might have so then it's not the embodiment technology that matters as much as it is the rendering technology, right? The quality of the graphics card, the quality of the number of polygons in the model that you're using, that kind of thing.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, that's a good question. Great question.